A question. How many languages are there in the world? Yes, how many languages are there in the world? Who counts them? Where are they spoken? This is one of the questions that its quick answer is, it depends. This is an it depends question. And the answer really depends on your definition of language. Deciding what is and what is not a language is not that easy. Imagine that you like a red liquid food made of tomato paste and slices of onion, or the spicy, a salty taste, something like this. You as a Kurdish speaker call it maraga. Your neighbor calls it trish. Your friend calls it soup. In the Arabic menus in the restaurants, it's written maraq. Now think of this chain of words for the same food. The further we go, the more different words we hear. All around the globe, we hear more and more different words for it. Perhaps every 100 miles or so, the word changes a little bit and becomes more difficult to understand. Alright, where exactly can you draw a line between two languages? I mean, where exactly a language ends and another starts? Kind of difficult, right? Sometimes drawing this line is not that difficult. For example, Iraqi people speak in Arabic. Cross the Iranian border, you see people speaking Persian. Two different languages. Totally different. In some other situations, the differences are small, but the subject matter remains political or social. Swedish and Norwegian can very easily understand each other, but they have different cultures, different histories, customs, and different governments. They see themselves as totally two different nations. More or less the same thing goes with Malay and Indonesians, or Macedonians and Bulgarians. That's why counting languages of the world is not that easy. Some language groups are so far from their cousin languages that they hardly understand them. For example, Serbians and Croatians can easily understand each other, but they have different writing systems. There are other groups that go right the opposite. For example, nearly 1.5 billion people live in China, and there are at least 7 different dialects that none of them can understand the other. Or understanding from one region to the other is quite difficult. But they have made use of this diversity. They smartly agreed on one form of ancient writing because they think that they belong to one nation. And this unified form of writing is used throughout the country. In other words, they have difficulties in understanding in spoken language, not in written language. Another dimension which is to be considered to answer our question is socioeconomics. Generally, those who have good educational and economic opportunities are found to speak or use discourse somehow different. Sometimes we notice that these different classes of people cannot understand each other easily, or the upper class just don't want to understand to the lower class. This is especially true in the societies in which class discriminations prevail. This leads to a societal dichotomy. Dichotomy means having two different classes. And this continues until there will emerge two different dialects or two different languages. Each group claims authenticity for its language. So, identifying a language is not an easy task, and counting the languages of the world depends on their definitions. More than that, the question how many languages are there in the world depends on when this question is asked, the time. Just like humans, languages are born, change, grow up, sometimes will give birth, and eventually will expire and go extinct. Another factor to be considered is why you count them. Now, linguists want to know more about the structure of a language. A teacher may want to know how many students have difficulty in understanding the course book because it's not written in their language form. Now, this linguist and that teacher may get different results in counting the languages of the world. using their own measurements and their own definitions for language. Well, although we never get an exact and 100% answer for the question of how many languages are there in the world, but the closest number can be found by the Ethnologue researchers. Ethnologue is a well-known institution specialized in world languages. It publishes a new edition yearly. It's founded in 1951. It has now 26 editions in 2023. They estimated all the living languages of the world around 7,000 to 7,200 living languages, including sign languages. Some of these languages are endangered languages. Endangered languages are those languages that are about to expire and, if not rescued, die. In fact, more than a quarter of the world's languages have less than 1,000 speakers, and 70% of the world's languages have less than 10,000 speakers. Although some of these small language groups are very conservative and protect their own languages whatsoever, but protecting language and keeping it alive becomes much more difficult when you have very few speakers, or another larger language takes control and people of the small group use it. If you look at this issue in another angle, we see that there are also very big language groups. Linguists predict that the large group of languages will drive off hundreds and thousands of these small group languages in the next century. Now, the largest spoken language in the world is Mandarin, which is spoken as a mother tongue by 900 million people in China. English and Spanish have more than 400 million native speakers each. There are also large language groups that have around 200 million native speakers, such as Hindi, Bengali, Arabic, Portuguese, Russian, and Japanese. Apart from just counting the world languages simply, there is another interesting thing. That is how these languages are distributed around the planet. We usually see Europe to be a multilingual place that has a lot of different languages, containing 288 different languages. But this is only 4% of the living languages of the world. Now compare this with Asia, that contains 2,303 living languages, which form 1/3 of the living languages of the world. Again, look at Africa. It has 2,140 living languages, which makes up 30% of all living languages of the world. In the two Americas, there are roughly 1,058 living languages, which is 15% of all the living languages of the world. And finally, there are 1,322 living languages all around the Pacific Ocean. These numbers are changing as some languages are lost or new ones born, and linguists continuously gather more and more information about new languages and new characteristics from faraway places of the planet. So, what is clear is that the diversity of language is an amazing phenomenon. Every language is a window that looks out a culture and an environment in which it's spoken. Not only that, but every language is a window that looks out the human brains. Moreover, and maybe this is the most important one, every language represents an identity, a group of people who define themselves as one entity and have one common history and one culture. So, there are very good reasons for not only studying a language, but also for protecting whatever is related to this language. Thank you for watching.